and I have to say that you guys, thank you for always letting me kind of crash all of your stuff. I really enjoy everything that your chapter is doing. There's a lot of chapters doing great things, but I really have enjoyed, you guys have really kind of done a lot of things outside of the box. And I think that's why I so much enjoy being around you. You have so much great energy within your chapter. And I loved all the stories tonight. I feel like I learned so much. I actually took some notes. And I loved how a lot of you have taken passions in your life and have turned it, into lifestyle changes or into your career or, your love on the side. I just think that it's amazing. So thank you for letting me share. So I'm also going to share my screen if I can here. And let's see, I'm not going to spend too much time just showing you my screen, but so I often am asked, where are you from? You guys probably all get this question. Where are you from? Where did you grow up? It's I think a very normal question, but for me, it's a difficult question because usually my answer is I'm from nowhere and everywhere. So I am what they call a third culture kid, and that is truly a term. And if you haven't heard of it, I'm here to tell you about what that means. So as a third culture kid, it means I'm a global nomad. My parents, my dad was born in Kansas. He grew up in Kansas. He was a Kansas boy. He went to Kansas State. My grandparents went to Kansas State. And in the late 60s, my father decided to volunteer to go in the Peace Corps. So he was in the Peace Corps in Borneo. And when the Vietnam War happened, my father was the first person, very patriotic man, volunteered to go to Vietnam. So my dad went to Vietnam and he met my mother there. And my mother is Chinese. Her family fled China and fled the communists in China and moved to Vietnam when she was little. And so she happened to be working at one of their American bases and met my father there. So from there, my story begins. And really, I spent the rest of my childhood like a third culture kid, which means that most of my development years as a child were spent in cultures other than my nationality. So obviously when my dad married my mom, she became an American citizen, and my sister and I, both born in Vietnam, were also American citizens. We were born in American hospitals there. So being an American citizen, but actually have never lived in the States for a long time when I was young, it's kind of an unusual place to be, right? So I identify as an American, but I was raised in multiple different cultures. So we stayed in Vietnam till 1975 when Vietnam fell. So I, sometimes say, that I lived my life seeing things that other people didn't. And maybe when I was growing up, I took advantage, I took it for granted. It wasn't something, a lot of times now I'll tell you guys this story and a lot of you will say, what an amazing story. But I grew up around a lot of other people like me who have amazing stories too. So it wasn't something that I really understood or embraced of who I was as a third culture kid till I was an adult, till I came to the States for college. So this is obviously my parents and me when I was born in Vietnam. So from there, my parents moved back to the States for a brief time after the war. We spent a lot of time, my dad had a hard time finding a job. I'm sure you guys have heard those stories. I don't have to get into detail. As a vet of Vietnam War, they weren't always treated very well when they first came back to the States. So it was difficult for my parents. And my dad, being someone that wanted to see the world and had really started that journey, found his way to the US State Department. And so that was one of the only places that was hiring vets, and my dad decided to take it. But the jobs generally took you to what they would call hardship posts, which my dad took because they paid well and they took care of our family at the same time. So the first post, after being in the States for maybe a little less than a year, we went to Africa, and we lived in a country called Mauritania. So as I was growing up in my preschool years, I grew up all over Africa till I was 11 years old. So we started in Mauritania. I spent my afternoons after school playing on the beach of the Ivory Coast, going to the Sahara Desert, riding camels, doing all these things that as a little kid were very normal to me, embracing and integrating into the cultures there, going to school there locally. So all these things became a part of who I am, which was a meld of multiple different cultures, multicultural. So from there, let me see if I can, we moved to the Gambia, which is just another country just south of Mauritania. And there, my sister and I went to school there and had lots of great friends there and had lots of great experiences. At the same time of being integrated into the cultures there, we were also still definitely given, definitely given peeks to what the American culture was like, but everything we saw was basically from the outside. So we watched James Bond movies just like the others. We would get so excited when we would get Twizzlers and M&Ms that, people would ship from the States. All those little things that made us super excited about, being American, and we felt very American, but we really didn't know what it was like to be an American because we hadn't lived in the States yet, not for long and not at an age where we understood it. So when we moved from Africa, sorry, I'm going to go back a little bit. We moved from Gambia, we moved to Swaziland, which is a little country that is surrounded by South Africa. And I'm going to tell this story because I think it's just important with the current climate in the world. When we moved there, my dad decided that we were going to fly into South Africa and drive to Swaziland, which was probably about a 6-hour drive because he thought it'd be great for us to see what life was like in South Africa. So my dad's need for and curiosity of the world is something that I feel like I still have. So we started driving through South Africa. When we first got to the airport, though, when we went to go get the rental car, my dad, I don't know if he just didn't realize it, and at the time I didn't really see it because I was young. I was probably 9, 10 years old, 10. My parents' marriage was actually against the law because apartheid was still in place in South Africa when we got there. So my dad was not allowed to check into the rental car place in the airport. We had to walk around to the back of the garage, and my sister, my mom, and I had to stand outside while my dad got the keys to the rental car. And proceeded as we went through our trip through South Africa, as amazing as the landscape and the country is, it was definitely something that I remember driving up to a gas station, my dad pulling in, the gentleman telling my dad that he wasn't allowed to pump gas at that pump. We had to go to the other side of the gas station, which my dad did. My dad accommodated, didn't say anything. And I remember the guy looking at my sister and I and just, doing things like this, like at my sister and I, who are 7 and 9 years old. So at the time, my mom was saying, just don't worry about it, and that's fine. We ended up not being able to stay in hotels, certain hotels. We had to stay in hotels that were considered okay for people of color. So it was a really interesting worldview that I got at such a young age. When we got to Swaziland, it's a free country, and it is run by the Swahilis, and there's actually a king, and so it's very different, and they didn't have apartheid, so our life there was very different. We lived there till I was about 11. We moved to Japan, which was one of my favorite things that's ever, that we ever did, and I love Japan. And at this time, we lived actually on the American compound, so we got a little bit more of a glimpse of what American culture was like. We had a commissary, for those of you who might know what a commissary was. We were actually able to get American food, and it was very, very much of a different experience living in Japan, which we loved. We had a lot of freedom as kids. And actually, I met my husband there in 7th and 8th grade homeroom. And I think I have a picture here. This is actually me, if you can believe it. And that's my husband, who doesn't look anything like that. I'll show you another picture later. But this is what my school looked like. We were pretty diverse. We went to international American schools. So it was a great experience, and I was there till I was in 10th grade. And my dad decided then we were moving again. We moved to New Delhi, India. So India was a whole nother experience, which I truly loved, and just a culture that is unlike any other. And I took the opportunity to travel a lot while I was there. I was also a little older, being 16, 17, 18. My sister and I traveled all over the country. My parents came with us on some trips. Obviously, you can see us at the Taj Mahal. And it was just a very fascinating and amazing experience for me, which I think, when I look back on it now, is the reason why I still love to hear people's stories. And I am so interested in what each person's about, because I know everybody is so unique, and I love to celebrate those differences. So this is my family. It's my sister. She was crying because that was when I graduated. So my mom and dad. And this is my family now. And so what's funny is that all I ever dreamed about was living in the United States. So I came here for college, and I really kept telling myself, one day when I have a family, I want to live in one place, and I want my kids to grow up and go to one school, right? Because you always kind of want what you don't have or what you didn't grow up with. And what's funny to me is my kids now always say, why didn't we move around more? Why did we always stay in one place? But it's so funny because, you know, I really wanted that for them. And I think it's an experience now. Hopefully they'll go and see the world in a different way, but they've had the experience of being in one place for a long time. So this is my family, and this is us celebrating this last year. So in hopes of keeping the fires of curiosity going with my kids, even though they may not be third culture kids like myself, to still travel, take them to travel, to see the world, expand their worldview, and continue to celebrate the differences and the stories of everybody they meet. So hopefully that gave you a little insight in me in a short period of time. And you know, I now you guys know me even better than maybe you have been able to hear about me in previous get-togethers that we've had. So thank you so much for listening.